Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And we are at episode 62. And we are calling this the About Us show. Now, I am not a numerology person, but this is...
I am.
Yeah, okay. Then this is because you mentioned something about this last time, and it gave me this idea. So this is episode 62. Eugene and I are both 62 years old, and we were born in 1962. And we both have birthdays in August, so we're about to turn 63. And so I thought, you know what, this is a good time for us to do an About Us show where we interview each other and ask some questions and see what comes up.
Right. Good. I'm game. When I just did it when my last book show was in Austin. And I tell them it's a special deal, for the Q&A section. If you put your phones down for 5 minutes, I will answer any question asked of me as truthfully as humanly possible, as long as the phones are away. As long as I can deny I said what I said later, I will tell you whatever you want to know. So go ahead. And usually people don't believe me, or they don't have a research basis for being able to ask good questions. Well, I had a knowledgeable audience in Austin, and they asked a lot of questions. And I remember sitting there at one point pausing and going like, I don't know if they can handle it. And then I go, you know what? I'm going to make my interior dialogue exterior. I go, I don't know if you can handle it, but you asked. And so here is this filthy story I'm about to tell you. And they took it. They were okay.
Well, we'll see how this goes, because I guess if we were going to be really brave, we would do this as a live and let the audience come up with the questions as opposed to the questions that we sculpted for our particular purposes here. But we'll keep that in mind for something in the future. Right. Okay, so I'm going to start with an easy one, maybe. What one person had the most influence on your life and why?
On my life?
Mm-hmm.
On my life, I'd have to say my mom, because she was one hell of a taskmaster, mistress, as the case may be. And at one point, I decided, rather than spend my time fleeing from her, her slave driving desire to have me exceed beyond measure, I got it. I'm going to stay ahead of that. And I think I remember being about either 14 or 15. And I was just like, I don't need somebody whipping me, and they won't be able to whip me if I'm far out ahead of the race. And that's when I really buckled down and started to work extremely hard academically. And that's right around the time somebody's a freshman in high school. So, it's perfect.
Yeah, and I think the person that had the most influence on my life was my father. Similar reasons. He was first generation Italian, and so had that very immigrant mindset of like, you will do well in school. And I pretty much never brought home less than an A unless it was something that had to do with math, which I wasn't good at. And then I remember my dad, who was a physicist by training. So
he's shocked.
Super smart. I realized there was some gene pool distribution issue that I couldn't do basic algebra. But I remember him staying up late at night to write out pages of description explaining the algebraic equations, which of course might as well have been in ancient Greek. But the idea of like the fact that he put the effort into it, right? And he was willing to participate. But I think the other thing that really made an impact on me is that he only had 2 daughters. I'm the oldest, and then I have a younger sister. And I don't think he would have raised a boy any differently than he raised me. That I was not allowed to learn how to drive a car until I couldn't I'll change that. He taught me how to drive when as soon as my feet could reach the pedals. And I was about 13 because I was pretty tall, because he was legally blind, but memorized the DMV test so that he kept getting a driver's license.
I had to know this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was scary. And I didn't realize this until later, but I'm like, he was blind. Why was he driving? But I think the reason he let me learn how to drive so early is that he figured there might be some time where he wouldn't be able to fake it enough to, navigate around things. So he wanted me to drive, but I couldn't get my license until I knew how to change a tire and change a fan belt. We had an old Country Squire station wagon, so I had to learn how to do those things. And he also always taught me about work. Like his assumption when I was growing up was that I would have a career, I would support myself and my family, and I would be successful. And this is like the 70s. Right? Like it's a different era. And the fact he would tell me about work, I remember him teaching me how to negotiate when I was in elementary school. Mm-hmm. Not something I would advise to teach your children, but he gave me those skills.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you want to get granular about it, it wasn't just the hard driving stuff. With African American families, you hear a lot about the talk, and the father is supposed to have the talk, presumably about how to deal with racism in America. We never did any of that crap. It was not. There was it's hard enough to be a human without singling your kid out for the expectation that you're going to be singled out. But she did say at one point, I came home and she. I'd gotten a B plus in, and also I struggled with math in I think trigonometry, and she was very upset about the B plus, and I got upset, and I usually just took it, but this time I was really upset. Went off to my room, and she came in later, and she was in tears, and she said, "Listen, I need you to do better than even you would under normal circumstances, because the way things are in America right now, you will find that you have to be, your betterness has to be unimpugnable. You have to be, if you think that you need to be a 10 to get ahead, dial it into 12, dial it into 15, dial it into 20, because people are not going to give you anything for any reason at all." So I think, in terms of being granular, it wasn't just like a tiger mom thing of you got to work hard, you got to work hard. She had a basis for, and she grew up in an age where people were being, African American folks being killed for trying to vote. So this was the way that she dealt with it without dealing with it. There was no talk, but she was like, look, the way the world is such that you're going to have to be, non-parial to, to succeed. And I want you to succeed, which I understood.
Okay, here's another one. Where did you first see me and what did you think?
Well, I first saw you in the dorms, but that's not the first time I remember seeing you. And the first time I remember seeing you would have to be the summer of 81. And I had a girlfriend who was working at the Smithsonian that summer, and I went to visit her in Washington, D.C., and we had gone to eat, and I look up, and there you were sitting in the back of a Jeep. And we had not been formally introduced. We didn't speak to each other the entirety of our freshman year, but it was clear I recognized you and that you recognized me. So I was like, and the Jeep was going pretty fast. So I was like, hey, and you went, hey, and that was it until well after college. So.
That's funny because I remember seeing you at Stanford and you made a big impression. You had a mohawk for some of that time. You were on a skateboard. There weren't a lot of skateboards at Stanford. Lots of BMWs. This was in the 80s, but not a lot of skateboards. I had a bicycle. I didn't have a car. I had a bicycle. And you seemed very angry all of the time. And so I was like, I'm gonna avoid this young man with the mohawk and the scowl and the skateboard. And then when we met after college, we ended up working out at the same gym, and you were so friendly and affable. And I realized maybe that was a persona, this notion that the way you presented yourself to the world in college was different to how you were in a one-on-one interaction in real life later.
Well, that has to do with resting bitch face. I mean, if I'm not smiling, I have been told I am scary. I mean, most of the time I was just walking around trying to get through my day and wasn't aware of being extra specially angry, but I wasn't smiling. But saw you in Gold's Gym. I was smiling. That was my happy place, Gold's Gym. So that was all the difference in the world, you know.
Spent
But
a
I don't remember whether you came up to me or I came up to you in gym. But again, it was another one of those moments where I didn't know you, but I recognized you, so we spoke.
right. Right. That's funny. I'd forgotten the Washington, D.C. thing. I totally forgot.
Yeah,
It's
and there was the guy driving. I liked him quite a lot. I didn't really know him either, but I think he was in your dorm.
John Kaufman. He was my best. He was my best friend in college. Yeah, and he had a Jeep, and we drove across country because why not?
I think he and I may have worked together in food service. I had some basis for liking him. We weren't really friends, but my interaction with him was always pleasant.
Yes, and he was and is a good guy. All right. Do you have any big regrets in your career?
Oh yeah, sure. I have the most massive one is just the stupidest one, but it was leaving Apple to go to Adobe. Massive, massive mistake. And I not only that, I've known it. This is the horrible part about it. I've known it was a mistake 2 days after I had done so, and 2 days after I'd start working at Adobe. So I've had a long time to think about how bad of a mistake it was, and it doesn't get any better anytime I think about it. Right? Like I just built a house in Spain on the 14 months I spent at Apple. Right? That's but that. I defend it because it's just one of those things where I 100 times would probably do the same thing. Adobe came and offered me 48% more salary than Apple was paying. Steve Jobs sent me an email and said, you should stay. And I was like, yeah, but they've offered so much money, 48%. Some people don't even make that in a year. And he was like, I'll give you 10 grand more. And I'm telling you should stay. And I ignored him. This was a personal email from the man himself. I ignored him and I went to Adobe. And I said, even if the gig at Adobe only lasts a year, well, then I got to 48% is a lot. And I start the first 2 days into, orientation at Adobe. I was like, oh God, I made a terrible mistake because I assumed they were both companies run by old hippies. So it'd be the same vibe and couldn't be more different in terms of companies. So that is my biggest professional mistake.
Do you have any advice for people that are listening based on that mistake?
Yeah, of course. Listen, when I went to Adobe, I got a buttload of stock as well, but it just wasn't as valuable, right? So you have to think about value. And there's something Andy Grove at Intel once said to me. He goes, more money will not make you happier. And I laughed in his face. but as miserable as I was at Adobe, I came to the conclusion that he was really right. I was making 48% more than even the increased amount that they were going to give me at Apple. And I was not happy a single day at Adobe. So don't let money, honest to God, don't. It's tempting, but, of course, a year into the Adobe job, they laid off the entire, Adobe.com editorial managerial staff. So it was literally maybe, I don't know, 15 months, maybe that long. So it was a drag, and I made a few friends there, but generally it was a bad fit. So don't let, honest to God, don't let money be. Yeah, it sounds strange to say, but I just should have stayed at Apple. But I didn't stay at Apple because creepy things were happening. And a guy who I had liked, my group fell apart because, this whole thing about A-list players at Apple and B-list players, right? Steve loved the A-list players and treated everybody who was B-list as like garbage. And so I was an A-list guy, and my boss was, who was one of my favorite bosses ever. When the group boss left, he thought, I'm going to be elevated because I'm A-list. And Steve didn't elevate him. And he got angry and did what people do in those situations. He left and he went to Adobe. And then somebody who I would be working with, who was going to, claim my rights like an athlete, just going to lunch. He said, Chris left. And he goes, now you're mine. And the tone and the timbre of that bugged me. I didn't like it. I didn't like how it felt. I didn't like how it sounded. And I think I literally went back to my desk and told the guys at Adobe I was taking the job. So.
Interesting. I guess for me, I'm not a big regret person. I'm kind of like, shit happens, you learn, you move on. But I think now as I'm older, my biggest regret is working as much as I did when my kids were young. And
Yeah.
to be fair, I mean, I was a single parent. Their father lived in Europe. I needed the money. There weren't a lot of options for me, right? So I had to work.
Yeah.
But I think I also used that to justify a career path that I thought was going to help me pay for the kids' college and achieve these financial objectives that I wanted. But it also was just, I was very ambitious and I wanted to work in a particular technology and advertising. And, in advertising then and now, you don't, there's not a work-life balance. That's not a thing. And,
Right.
I worked in business development. So I ran pitches for big ad agencies. And I would work late. I would work overnights sometimes, and I had to do a lot of travel, and it was hard on my kids. It was hard on my kids, and I guess the advice that I have is like, keep your priorities straight, because of course, we have this idea of like, oh, well, it'll be different and I'll have time in the future and I'm working for my kid. Well, and as most of you know, my son died when he was 19, and I wish that I could have had more time with him when he was around, and
Yeah.
I don't. And so I do think that kind of navigating, of course I had to work, and of course I had to work at jobs that were going to pay for their braces and afford, the option to buy a house. And I'm not in any way saying that parents should not work and that you need to provide for your family, but recognizing where is the line where, your kids would probably rather have you home more, particularly when they're young enough to want you around, than have, more in your 401k.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be strange to say this, but COVID helped me immeasurably to see exactly what you just said, and being able to work from home it was like the scales fell from my eyes, and I did for a few months there actually start to feel bad about how I had applied myself in the workplace, and I'm talking about, a Silicon Valley career that started in 1985 or 86. So, and a good 10 years of that I spent without kids at all. Don't feel bad about that. But, then I think my oldest was born. I remember getting presents from folks at Apple. So she must have been born when I was at Apple. And that was right around the time I had 3 jobs, right? I was editor in chief of Code magazine at the same time as I was, an editor for Apple.com at the same time as I was senior vice president for a company called Skin Crawler. So it was like a lot of, and, I made over $300,000 for about 3 years in there. But at this point, I wouldn't. What? The good thing is, having 3 kids, they formed a team, and so they have no complaints about parenting or the amount of time or so forth. But now with one kid that I'm, whose daily care I'm involved with, I could just I couldn't do it to her. I couldn't do it again. I couldn't do it again the way I did it before. So
yeah. What is something that you're afraid of that other people might be surprised to learn scares you?
Pretty much everything, but it's a weird turn of the gyre, right? For example, I've lived the entirety of my life, in a desire to be somehow outside of fear, which means the entirety of my life has been motivated by fear, right? So not just lifting weights because you like lifting weights, but lifting weights because then you can form this carapace of, muscular carapace of protection, and then same with martial arts, and same with, and you think, okay, guys in martial arts taking Muay Thai, competitive and competed and beating people like a bona fide, like tough guy, used to have a federal firearms license, used to, and you think, okay, when you finally get to that mountaintop, you will rest easy. And it never happens because it's become a habit. So I'm afraid of everything. Like Bukowski once said, pulling up in traffic next to a bodybuilder, he looked over and he was like, more afraid to die than the rest of us. And I think, but that shouldn't be a surprise. I think I stink of this. So the good part is, I mean, the paranoia has served me well. I backed off a bit. I no longer, well, that's not true. I was going to say I no longer sleep with weapons, but that's not true. So anybody out there getting any wise ideas, know that. So yeah, everything, mushrooms, toaster, malfunctioning toasters, raccoons, all scare me. I think it's philosophically unsound to try to live beyond fear at this point. I've given up. So that means everything frightens me.
I guess one of the things that I'm afraid of that might surprise people is I'm afraid of public speaking. And I do it all the time, but it's very scary to me. And I remember I was doing a one-woman show in Seattle at the Seattle Center, which is a big theater, big place. It's me on a stage and a one-woman show. And a friend of mine came up to me before the show and said, well, this is easy for you because you don't get nervous. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I've been physically ill for the last 3 days. And I'm like, why do you think that? And I realize it's because what I've learned is I've just learned how to hide it. Right. So I realize that it's funny because I do trainings for people on how to do presentations and people are always surprised when I say I get sick beforehand. I have puked in green rooms before and then gone on to, gotten on the radio and been just fine. And the idea of anxiety you can make it so it's not visible. And I'm not suggesting that we should all build such elaborate masking skills. I mean, I have stood up in front of a crowd of people in a full-blown fucking panic attack, and nobody knows. Which is that's not healthy. That's not healthy. I'm not advising that. But I think it is something that is reassuring to people to recognize oh, you can have fear. And I mean, fear isn't even a terror. And you can do the thing anyway.
That's really strange for me to hear, of course, because I mean, I've lived a life on the stage. I mean, since doing the fir tree at Montessori in 1967, and I feel more normal and at home on stage than I do at any time off stage. So that doesn't bother me. I mean, that's strange for me always when I hear people oh, I can't do it. So especially because you've done it. So
and I think that was interesting because I did the one-woman show, which is one of my favorite pieces that I've ever favorite piece of art that I've ever made is that one-woman show. And I did 3 performances of it, and then I realized the toll of doing it was more than I was willing to take, the physical and emotional, psychological toll of standing up on a stage and talking about what I was talking about. It was about sexual harassment, the death of my son. It was a really tough, heavy piece of work. And I decided I wasn't, because I wanted to go and do it at a small theater in New York. My producer, Maggie Sino, who's a genius, my director is in New York. And I was thinking about doing, and then I was like, I can't do it anymore. And so there is a way in which it is limiting. And to me, it's equally unfathomable. Wait, you like getting up on a stage? I mean, obviously, because you do a lot of it, but I'm I can't, it's like extrovert. I can't understand extroversion because it's so antithetical to me. I can't understand willingly jumping up on a stage and taking most of your clothes off. It's a mystery to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I guess it is strange. But I mean, my sense, there's a great line from an old Black Flag song, and he sings, I want to make you feel how you make me feel. And it's one of the few places where you can actually comfortably achieve that. So I'm afraid and the audience is afraid. Perfect. But I'm not afraid of being on stage, So that's that. I'm manifesting all my other generalized life fears, I guess. So
interesting. Name one unexpected talent you have that people who don't know you well might not know?
I tell you, I was in Graz, Austria, and walking along the street with a promoter, and I see a kid, and I say, "Hey, kid, come over here." The kid comes over, and I said, "Give me this thing." And he had a unicycle, and I jumped on the unicycle and rode all around this parking lot in Graz, Austria. And I get back to where the promoter is standing with the kid, amazed. I give the unicycle to the kid, who he wasn't able to really ride it. He was trying to learn. And so he walks off with it. And the promoter kind of just looks at me and goes, "So you're like a clown." I said, "Well, I can't juggle, but I see where you're going with this." So yeah, most people don't know I could ride a unicycle.
I guess the talent that people might not know that I have is actually one that when I was thinking about it, I think you share, which is I have a genius for friendship. I have friends. My oldest friend, Mary Virginia, and I have been friends since we were 12, which is half a century. And I mean, we talk almost every day, right? She's like my sister. And then Juliet and I have been friends for over 20 years, deep, close friendship. And like, you know, we're also like sisters. You and I have been friends for 40 years through all sorts of different life circumstances and permutations. And I think that there is a genius to be able to maintain close friendships. And there are friendships, like I have friends from college who I might not talk to for a few years. And when we connect, we pick that thread right up. And I still feel like I'm very close to them. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people where you sustain an intimacy in an ongoing way and you're part of their life in where they become your chosen family. And I think that is, I think that's a superpower. And I think you do the same thing. Would you say that?
Yeah. I'm a little bit harder about it than you are, just because I don't have the same level of patience. So there have been some people who who our options have lapsed. Like if you're of the mind to be annoyed with me about something and are thinking I'm going to ask you what the problem is, that's never going to happen. So those people, I'll just end up sending an email to one of these people at one point because I'll forget that they're peeved about something, and the email will come bouncing back because they've changed your email address, and I just kind of go, "Oh, I moved 9 times before I was 10." So it's kind of built into the machinery that you engage and then disengage. So who knows? But yeah, generally I got friends now. Who was going to come to one of the shows? This guy who the last time I saw in New York, couldn't make it. Something came up with his health. I've known him since I was like 9 years old. The guy's going to come to a Boone Wells show. I was actually psychically kind of sort of uncomfortable with it. We stayed in touch over the years. I mean, with all kinds of weird connections. Like he was the first guy to get me into underground comics, and then he became like a noted photographer, and he was taking photos of shows that I was actually at, not knowing at all that I was the same kid from camp. And then it turns out his brother, his stepbrother, his stepbrother went to Stanford as well. So his stepbrother's father ran off with his mother, and that's why his parents were getting divorced in 1973. It's just like, wow. Which he apologized for. He goes, "Remember how much of a flip case I was when we were 11? It's because my father, my mother had run off with some guy, and that guy turned out to be Ben Wilson. We knew he was a beta at Stanford. His father." So weird small world connections.
All right. So last question. We are both writing, making art, promoting books. What keeps you going, and how long do you think you'll keep going?
I mean, once I removed myself, I used to be the business manager, and I fired myself as a business manager for the musical group I was in at the time. And I had realized I had realized that it was making me unhappy. Like it was making me not enjoy the act of creation, seeing how badly the creation was treated afterward. So I formally fired myself from it. So I'm not doing it. I'm not trying to negotiate the feelings or the ideas, the thoughts or impulses of the 3 people I was in the band with, as well as deal with the hostile outside world of promoters, booking agents, and marketing people and public relations folks. Wasn't going to do it. I've been much happier since then. Esquire magazine, the Kazakhstan version, has recently asked me to write a piece, and they're starting to negotiate with me over the money. And I just kind of did this hand wave thing. I go, whatever the market will bear. I don't work for free. Whatever the market will bear. And they were like, cool, we're on. We're on. Good, great. There you go. So my longtime desire, I've been in GQ before, but my long-time desire to be an Esquire is being satisfied by the wonderful nation of Kazakhstan. So this is the kind of stuff where, there are 1,000 ways to say yes. And I find myself open to saying yes a lot. And, being formally retired from going to staff meetings doesn't mean that even I'm going to stop saying yes to things. I still leave my profile up on LinkedIn on the outside chance that maybe there's somebody sitting around and going, God, I really want to start this new editorial venture, but only if I had access to a genius. Hey, what about that Robinson guy? So that's fun to me. My condition, of course, would be staff meetings at a minimum once a month at most. We don't need any more than that. Just get to work, So I intend to keep on keeping on.
And I guess for me, I have always made art. I have always been a writer since I could literally hold a pencil, and I don't anticipate ever not doing that. The question is, how do I get my work into the public eye? Like, I have been promoting a book, my new book, and I find it very onerous, and I am not enjoying this part of it. And so part of how much I engage in social media, how much I participate in the promotion part of it is kind of a to be determined. I mean, right now it's a necessary evil, and I'll continue to do it. And so I think that I'm navigating that. I have a day job. I am just financially far away from retiring, and that's good and bad. I mean, I wish that was retirement was more of an option. But I also appreciate the fact that I do enjoy having the day job as an executive coach and a consultant to sort of put my mind in one place, and then being able to go and write and do my art in another way. I've always done that. And there is something that's sort of sustaining about it. I'm very disciplined about writing. When I sit down, the words come out, and they come out pretty quickly, and I don't get super precious or fussy about it. And because I just don't have the time. And it's been that way my whole life, which I think ultimately serves the craft, which I think is useful. So,
hey, to quote Bukowski for the second time this segment, I would say I loved his line. Nobody that was worth a damn ever got a chance to write in peace.
Yeah.
So this idea that some people have, like, I got to be able to write in peace. I've known a couple of writers, and that's been right. I knew a couple of writers fairly closely who were like, I need my peace to get some. I wrote and I finished off a long slow screw, my novel, while I was working at Nikon. People be like leaving at 6 o'clock. I'd be like, I got to work a little bit later, and I'd be sitting there working on my novel. I mean, it.
And I wrote most of Radio Silence, my novel, at 2 o'clock in the morning on Friday and Saturday nights when my kids were asleep, because I was working a very demanding job. And that's the only time that I had to write. And I wrote a whole novel that way. Couldn't do it now, but I was young enough that I could do it. Do it then. Yeah.
Well, you'd be surprised at what you could do when I mean, I laughed at the time because I just read in, I think it was Architectural Review magazine, writers in their nooks. And I'm looking at Norman Mailer's nook out in Cape Cod and this beautiful windswept beach, which I wish to God I had never seen, because I don't think you know this, but in the run up to the HarperCollins publishing my fight book, they said, well, who can you get to give you some back cover blurbs on it? And I thought, listen, I am friends with Geraldine Page's daughter, and Geraldine Page's daughter would connect me to Rip Torn, who was her father, and Rip Torn famously had an on-set fist fight with Norman Mailer. So, I said, hey, look, I want to put Rip Torn. I want him to do. And she didn't think that was a good idea. So I was like, okay, well, screw that. Screw you. I'm going to go to Norman Mailer. And Norman Mailer and I were in touch. We were emailing back and forth, right? And he's down. He understood my desire to have him do it. I think I emailed him the copy, and then he asked me the question. He's like, how much you going to pay me for this? And of course, the first thing that popped into my mind was his beautiful windswept house on Cape Cod that was probably a $4 million deal. And I think I said in response something kind of snarky, like I said, nobody's asked for this for pay for this before, but I might. But if you're desperately in need of the money, I'm glad. And if you get the fight book right now, which is still orderable on Amazon, you will note the back cover does not have a blurb from Norman Mailer. Making friends wherever I go.
All right, that's a great story. And that is the end of our episode. If you have any ideas for future shows or questions for me or Eugene, send us an email at WTF@badbossbrief.com. And we will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's number 3, on Instagram. Reach out with your questions, concerns, work case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.